Hey everybody, it's Voltar here and welcome back. Now today I'm going to be taking you all on a journey where we revisit the GameCube. Yes, we're going back to this system because there have been recent new developments for mods for this system that make it that much easier to mod and it's that much more fun to mod. So that's worth taking a look at. Now mainly we'll be looking at two mods. We'll be looking at the horrible Pluto board that's been around since 2016 and nobody should buy anymore because it's just antiquated. And we'll also be looking at the brand new Kunai GC mod chip. Now this thing is amazing. Of course, Pico boot is great too, but let me tell you about some of the most contrasting features between these two mod chips. Number one, the Kunai GC installs wirelessly. Yes, there are no wires and it really gets installed in a matter of just a couple of minutes. It has no special 3D printed mount and it doesn't require any sort of special provisions. You literally lay it in place. It has a beautiful little QSB and it solders into the chip here on the system and it is done. The other main pro of this mod chip is the fact that it has 16 megabytes of internal memory. This allows you to install applications right to the mod chip. So in other words, if you're only interested in running Swiss and maybe Extrems' GBI software for the Game Boy player, you can install all of that directly to the mod chip. No memory card, no SD to SP2 here, nothing else necessary. It's phenomenal, well worth the price of admission. Now, I'll also be installing a few other small things, but mainly the big deal here is we have Greg Collins, or Laser Bear Industries. Can you see it? Can you see it? Okay, we have his new Bluetooth 4-port controller PCB replacement. This allows you to connect Bluetooth controllers, and it also has gorgeous LEDs you can't see right now that are controllable, highly customizable. It really is awesome if you want to use, say, a Wii U or Switch controller. It really is amazing. It even lets you turn this system off and on. It even allows you to do a soft or hard reset. Basically, it gives you complete power control in addition to having all that stock controller functionality with Bluetooth. Now, the GC video stuff, look, I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you. Of course, I'll stand up here for a minute. We have it here, as you can see. I have this beautiful HDMI port with the Greg Collins bezel around it so that it's tucked in nicely. But let me just talk for a moment about this, okay? So this is kind of important. The year is 2023. That's the year of our Lord Voltar, and I have to say to you, please, we have better options available, or let's make better options available than this Pluto board. Now, the attractive thing about the Pluto board, and the only reason people are really installing them now, is not because of its price and not because it's great, it's simply because it's available. Now, the GC Dual comes in and out of existence, frankly, when it comes to its inventory supply, and the Pluto is the only internal solution that I can see that is somewhat stateful and reliably available. Nonetheless, I want to see an internal solution that can run GC video that installs perfectly fine and that is streamlined. This is a general purpose dev board that people have been stuffing in GameCubes for the past 6 or 7 years. Fine. But we're beyond that now, and quite frankly, I don't like installing this because, number one, you have to reach out to a couple of different vendors to get complementary mods. For example, you saw that HDMI bezel. That's really a mount too, that Greg Collins of Laser Bear designed, that allows this to be affixed and set appropriately in the back. Without it, that mod just floats around in there, and it's just a printed circuit board that just literally floats around without any sort of security. That's terrible. The second part is there is no good way of interfacing currently the Pluto board to the GameCube's main board. Now, what I had to do was I decided to look around for products and I found this flex cable, and I'll stand up again because you know, that's what I do, but I found this flex cable. This flex cable is beautifully designed. I have no problems with that. It was very well done, and the maker did a good job. Unfortunately, this is just a terrible application for the type of mod that this is. This was ruined in a matter of about, 20 seconds, and it's just not a good solution because of the design limitations here that we have and the way that this was, not the way that it was routed, but the way that it was just made. So having said that, I had to take this out And I had to manually, by hand, wire in the Pluto board so that I could make sure we were getting solid stateful connections. Now this goes in the trash, obviously, but nonetheless, another problem is people on the internet have made video tutorials of removing the digital video port. Now this video port is not being made anymore. We should be preserving these. And the tutorials that I've seen, oh my God, they have people using hot air on a through-hole component like this with helpers such as Chip Quick. Now let me just talk about Chip Quick and hot air and this port. Chip Quick is a phenomenal low melting point solder system for surface mount components. It's great. It really can augment your technique. If you have poor technique, it can really cover up a lot of things, and it can really offset a lot of your own limitations if you don't know how to properly rework surface mount stuff. That's what Chip Quick's for. Chip Quick is a noob tool. It's not a bad tool, it's just for a noob tool, but it's for surface mount technology. This is a through-hole component, and the idea of using Chip Quick to lower the melting point temperature of a through-hole component so you can evacuate it doesn't make any sense, because the problem with this is not the melting point temperature of the solder that holds it in. The problem with this that people run into is that they can't get the energy into those thermal reliefs, into those plated through holes that will allow it to reach the melting point of the solder so that it can liquefy and then so you can solder suck it out. Well, let me tell you something. I'm going to show you how to properly remove this port without damaging it, without damaging your GameCube, and without doing anything that is just a waste of time and could potentially be more damaging. You don't want to blast a board like this with hot air any more than you have to. It's not saying that you can't, but you don't want to take the risk of delamination by shooting 480 degrees Celsius heat. I saw that, and the guy was just holding it there. And then I saw another guy just submerge it in Chip Quick, and I'm like, why are you making modding videos if you're not going to even really understand what you're doing here? Because this isn't good to teach people. We're not imparting good technique, and I have a problem with that because that's how these systems end up to me so that they can be fixed, or to other people. It's because, well, I saw it on the internet, so I thought it was a good idea. Guys, we're not going to do that here. So sit back, strap on. We're going to enjoy installing all of these, and we're going to learn something. Let's do it together, and let's do it centrally. Now we have it just about broken down here, but I want to talk about the removal of the heatsink. Now I see a lot of people do this, and more often than not, people tend to do more damage than they do any sort of good when removing this. And I'm going to give you a little secret here, a little tip. If you have a hair dryer, or better yet, if you have a hot air rework station, put some gentle heat on this heatsink so that we can remove a little bit of that tacky tension from the thermal pads underneath, and it will make this come out a little easier. Now I'm going to do about 100 degrees Celsius at around 50% airflow with my hot air rework station for about 25 seconds. If you have a hot air gun, or if you have a hair dryer, low heat for maybe 20-25 seconds, you know, at a good distance from the heatsink. You just want to soften it up just a bit, and this will come out like butter. And as you can see, I'm not going to be too hard on it here, but it really doesn't want to come out. It wiggles a little bit. We don't want to put any more stress on the BGA interposers underneath than we have to. So let's just put a little heat on here. Let's get it going. that's how you pull the heatsink. This looks pretty good. Let's clean this up, let's remove the main board, and let's get to the meat and potatoes. Now, we need to remove the main board from the bottom half of the GameCube shell. This is not a problem. What I like to do is turn the GameCube on its side so that the memory cards are on the left-hand side and the rear ports are on my right hand, just like this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cup it just like this, and I'm going to start lifting left and right, and I'm going to take my free left hand and I'm just going to get under it. I'm just going to push up just like that, and boom goes the dynamite, just like that. We have now freed the main board. And we're really now in a position here to get started. So the first order of business is we have to remove the digital video port right here, because this port is where our HDMI output is going to live. We got to trade this for the HDMI port. So let's zoom in and let's talk about how to work this port out without using any chip quick or any of that sort of newbie stuff. Let's get in here and let's get this going. Now, our chips here look fantastic, great work, but we're going to be working right here. This is the digital video port, and we must remove this from the main board because our HDMI bracket lives right here, and it's going to fill that cavity in the back plate. But having said that, I have for years seen people use ChipQuick and other low melting point solder systems to remove this. Guys, that kind of stuff works fantastic if you're working with surface mount components, like these tantalum caps here, or like these ICs here. It's great. But we're dealing with a through-hole component that's going through, I would guess, maybe a 1.4, this could be 1.6 millimeters in thick, FR4, pretty sure this is a 2-layer, could be 4-layer, I'm not sure. The point is, that solder system is not going to do a lot for getting heat in to this main board. It's great for lowering the melting point temperature of solder, but our real enemy here isn't the solder system used during the waving process. Let me zoom in and I'll explain. Now, the real enemy here are the very thick and large ground pores on the main board. If you look here at this nice post, we have this beautiful relief here where this ground pore just feeds right in here. We have a ground pore right in here. Sorry, that's a little bit blurry, but these are all ground pores. Now, getting energy into this is much more important than just lowering the melting point temperature. Once again, it doesn't matter how low this melting temperature is if we can't get heat to penetrate through this. So what we're going to do is not use any expensive solder system. I'm just going to use some good old-fashioned 6040 Kester leaded. We're going to flood these joints here nicely just to knock the oxidation off, and we're going to use our desoldering pump, and we're going to get this out. Let's get to work. Now, I'm going to take my knife edge tip here and watch very carefully. I'm just going to load it up with a generous amount of solder. I don't care if we have bridges here. That's not the point. Let's just come in here, introducing that solder, and watch very closely. We're starting at one end, and we're going to slowly work our way to the other, doing a caterpillar motion. This technique is where we move forward a pad or two, and then we move back a pad or two, and we just keep repeating that process until we get to the end. Now, once again, we're all the way here to the end. I'm flooding this baby full of solder. Now watch this. No more solder is going to be added. I'm just going to turn the board up like this, and I'm going to come back this way, just like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to come off just like that. Perfect. And I'm going to come right in here, and I'm just going to introduce some more fresh, just like this. And I'm just going to slowly introduce it. Now very carefully, I'm going to come off this. Watch. Just like that. Just like that. Come in here, very close. And very intimately, coming in here, come off of it just like that, bring it down, right into that ground. I don't care, it doesn't matter. This is not to be pretty. We are just introducing plenty of fresh solder. Okay, now we're going to flip this upside down, or the other way, and we're going to do the other side. That's actually a pretty good angle. Now we're going to come right in here, and I'm just going to float on the tops of these. Again, this is not a beauty contest. We are just introducing solder into these joints. We don't care about bridges. We don't care about gobs of solder. That's not the point. That is not the focus of this exercise. Now, naturally, you don't want to get solder on your other components, but as long as you're just bridging these pins here, you're in good shape. Okay, now I'm gonna flood all kinds. Watch. Flooding all kinds, and I'm gonna hold it up just like this. I'm gonna bring it down just like this. 1, 2, 3. Boom. Just like that. Come in here, we've got some bridging, no problem. We can leave it here, or we can come in here and fix it. It really doesn't matter one way or the other, because it's all going to be coming out anyways. Now we've got a big glob here. If that bothers you, we're going to be getting rid of it anyways, but if that's just more work, that's just more work for your iron or your soldering pump. That's more solder than you have to suck. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come out just like this, bring it out just like that, and you can repeat that a couple of times if you want. I'm having a hard time keeping the camera here in frame, but watch carefully. Fresh solder is really what you want here. Watch this come off the joint, boom, just like that. Now I'm going to start with this big, nice, juicy ground right here, this big ground post. Now watch this. Okay, we've made contact, we're molten. Give it a little bit of a wiggle and suck. The juices clean out. I just want this flush. I don't care if it evacuates all the solder out of these. We're going to rework these in a minute. But let's move down the line very carefully. So we're going to put our iron into position, we're going to swivel, and we're going to pull. Once again, put your desoldering nozzle in position, wait about 2 seconds, swivel and pull. Repeat. Swivel, pull. Now the big ground pours, give it a moment, let it go molten. Count to 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, pull. Beautiful. Now inspect your work and make sure that you have thoroughly cleared these. And if you really want a good test for that, hold the board up to the light. If you see light passing through, you're in good shape. All I'm going to do is I'm not going to pull this out. I'm just going to first start by wiggling. Now I can tell obviously that our grounds on each side are going to have a little more rework, and that's perfectly normal, that's perfectly fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bring this back down, and I am going to introduce some fresh solder back into these joints. A couple of things we can do here. I can either hold the board, and I can, while pushing down with my thumb, I can introduce some heat just like that, and watch that, it comes right out. We'll come to the other side. We'll put a little heat into that joint. Just like that. Now watch carefully. I'm not using a lot of force. Watch my pinky. Watch my pinky. Just a little bit here. Boom. Literally like butter. Let's zoom out and talk about that. Now we've cleaned the side here and this looks perfect. This pull went beautifully. And of course, when we use proper through-hole equipment to remove through-hole components, we don't damage them. This port is immaculate, and I'm going to save this because really these digital ports shouldn't be thrown away. So I'm going to put this to the side. But again, guys, please use proper technique. Try not to use a hot air rework station to remove through-hole components. You're just exposing a lot of things here to a lot of unnecessary heat, and it's really just amateur, and I think you guys can do a lot better than that. Chip Quick 2, seen it for years, great for surface mount stuff, but we're dealing with through-hole technology, and it's just a waste of money. 6040 series leaded solder, excellent. Will do the job just fine, knocks the temperature down and gets it in the right zone for you, and it'll also take that layer of oxidation off. At any rate, good work. Let's keep going. Now I have the Pluto board right here, center frame, and I've got our tweezers here right under it just to prop it up. But this is the part where we will install Helder's flex cable into position. Now this is very simple. We just flip the board upside down so that the HDMI is on the bottom and pointing up to the bottom top left there. And it's just a matter of coming in here and really simply lining this up like so, and just spotting this in. Now, in order to get this started, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean off one of my tips here. I'll just use this nice chisel tip to get things going. All I'm going to do is just nice and plentifully here, we're going to just introduce some solder just like that into this via. Perfectly well done here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to first just a drop of no clean on top. Once again, I want to make sure we have this loaded up because we're going to be doing a contacting technique. Now what I'm going to do is put this on top, and when I get this lined up to my satisfaction, I am just going to come right into here and I'm just going to touch it. I'm not worried about any other point. Don't worry about lining up anything else. You don't need tape, you don't need anything like that. Just focus on your first point. Now watch very carefully. I'm going to come in here like this, and I'm just going to make contact like so. Now once again, that's not a finished joint, that is not a complete joint, that's just a bodge to hold this in, but if you look, our alignment going down looks absolutely fantastic. Let's start right up here in this corner, and let's just make sure, yep, everything looks just fine. So I'm going to go ahead right here, I'm going to hold this down, just a drop once again of some good old-fashioned no clean, and I'm going to come right into this corner and just do another contact. 1, 2, 3, just like that. Boom. Perfect. Again, that's not a finished joint, we're just holding things in. Now, I've got these together. I'm going to go ahead and just pick any random joint here in the middle. I'm just going to flood some solder in there like that. Flood some solder in there like that. We're just locking this thing down so I don't have to pull out any tape or I don't have to use any adhesives. We're going to let the solder system work for us. Now, that's perfectly fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put this vertical just like this. And let's see if I can get a better shot. Let me see if I can't frame this just a little bit better. Great, now I think that's a pretty good shot. So what I'm going to do is, now that we have just a few little joints here bodged in, I'm just going to put a few drops of no clean down. Watch very carefully. I'm going to come right here to the center, not to the edges, but to the center. I'm going to introduce some flux and some solder. Now watch carefully. I'm just going to do a nice, small, fun run right across everything, nice and easy. Just like that, looking great. Coming across, beautiful. I'm going to clean my tip off. I'm going to start right here in the middle, just like this, and I'm going to work myself down to the edge just like this. Very carefully done. 1, 2, 3, and slowly I'm going to inch my way back to the heavens, back to the top, just like that. Now we have this little section up here to contend with. Again, not a big deal. I'm just going to come in here with some flux, and I'm going to use my chisel tip, and I will just spec these in individually. No problem. So just go ahead and position this in pretty good order. That looks fantastic. 1, 2. Okay, we're just holding those in right now. We're not finished soldering those joints. That's just acting as my tape. It's just serving as my tape. Now very carefully we'll come right in here, feed those in. Now we're talking. Now we're looking like a winner. Great. Clean off my tip. Got a little excess there. We'll finish it off right here. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. Doesn't get any cleaner than that. And just like that, we're all soldered in and we're ready to go. Good work. Now all of our soldering here looks fantastic. We're all done with this phase. What we're going to do now is I'm going to be bringing in this 3D printed mount that the Pluto kit sits into, provided by Greg Collins, Laser Bear Industries. You can buy this from his site, or he has files, I believe, on Printables or Thingiverse for this mount. So this is very simple. We're just going to take the mount and we're going to take our Pluto, put it in the top, start at an angle, and just make sure that you get, if you notice these little dowels here, lined up like so. Beautiful, that side's locked in. Swing this side around. We have a dowel right here, watch. Boom. We're all locked in and we're ready to go. Now you can drive some M2 screws in here. I'm not going to do that because this is pretty solid and I'm not too concerned about that, but man, what a great fit and finish. Okay, now we're going to be soldering this end to the unpopulated digital video footprint on our GameCube mainboard. Let's go for it. Also, don't forget about this little jumper right here. We need to strap it. Now we have the empty footprint here, and before I do anything, I am going to load up that tip just like so with solder and put this to the side, because right now what we're going to do is we're going to solder this. Now, your ribbon cable here, make sure that the cable is facing and pointing towards the motherboard, going down the motherboard, not like this, but like this, and make sure that you can see GC digital socket top. That is the correct orientation. You cannot screw this part up. It's very important. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take just a little bit of jelly flux here. Now I'm going to use this over no clean because it's going to give me just a little bit better performance when I'm doing contacts here. And all I'm going to do, watch very carefully, I'm just going to come in here and just use my solder as an applicator. It doesn't take much. Just a bit like this. Come in here across, Okay, now that's a pretty good helping, and I'm just going to spread some of this around. This is a great flux that works very well. It's non-caustic, and we're just going to get it all into those crevices just like that. That's perfectly reasonable. Now, I am going to begin by lining this up. Now, I'm just going to get the rows lined up with my hands. Nothing special here, nothing fancy. Grab it with both hands, hold on each side, and make sure we've got good alignment going down. And we want to make sure that this cable is nice and flat. Now, what I'm going to do is just bring it in here like so, and I'm going to drop it like that. Now, that looks pretty darn good. I'm going to start right there with point number 1, and I'm going to come right in here, and I don't care how pretty this looks. Again, this is not a beauty contest. I'm just going to come in there just like that. Now look, very carefully. Just like that. Perfect. Now I'm going to move my hand so you guys can see, but we've got that already anchored in. And how's our alignment going down the line? It is beautiful. So I'm going to come right down here, and we're just going to change positions. Now I'm going to come right like so, and I'm going to grab that tip. Now we should still have, as you can see, a healthy amount of solder. That's plenty to make a contact right here. Watch very carefully. It doesn't take much. We're just going to come in here, do a little swiveling. Beautiful. Now I'm going to let it go. Look, my hands are free. So now with my hands free, I am able to come right in here just like this and introduce fresh solder to each joint individually, and we can make beautiful joints just like so. So just come on in here, make sure you've got it nice and flat like so. Oop, we made a bridge. Sorry about that, guys. The camera's in my way and I can't see too well, but we'll clear that off just like that. I'm going to come right in here just like that. Let's repeat this process down the line. Let's go for it. Now I'm going to take my chisel tip and I'm going to start anywhere, and I'm just going to flood this thing with solder, and I'm going to take my other hand to make sure this is nice and flat. Now watch carefully. No tape, no special tricks here, no adhesives to hold this in position. I'm just using the solder system. And I'm going to make sure all of these joints look nice, and they look pretty good. Now I can let this go, and I can basically now just freely work with it and touch all these joints up. But use that solder system to your advantage. Make sure that you're getting the most utility out of it. It is a great thing if you know how to work with it, because if you do, you can come right in here just like this, and you can make beautiful joints, but you can also make little bodges that will hold your work into place as you're going, and you're going the distance. Now watch this. I'm just going to flood. Once again, I'm going to do a little dragging technique here where we just flood this across, and I'm going to go across the pins like so. We may have a little bridge there at the end, but we don't. Now look how beautiful that is. Now all this is locked in. All I'm going to do now is introduce some fresh solder right here into these very thick, heat-hungry ground pores just like that. Looks beautiful. We'll come over here to the left side. Once again, introducing that fresh 60-40. Right like so, and those welds look gorgeous. I'll clean this up with a little IPA, and we'll check out the solder. Well, I have to say, it doesn't get much cleaner than that. Okay guys, great job. Let's keep moving on. Guys, great work. Now we have two very large solder pads here on our flex. We've got to grab 5 volts from over here, and the controller hook is right down here on a test pad. So we'll go ahead and tin these up, and we'll talk about them, we'll just do them, and we'll finish this little part up right here. Let's go for it. Now what I'm going to do here is we have our controller line that's going to run between the RAM and the GPU, so I'm going to use just a little bit of UV cured resin just so that I can make sure that this line stays in position and doesn't plop out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, we're going to apply a little bit of this, and we're going to cure it. Now, we're going to have to do a minor case modification to the actual GameCube, and we're going to have to do a serious modification to the GameCube's optical drive's casing. So right here, we have this boss that lives right here. We're going to zoom in on this because all we're going to do is we're just going to take some nice flush cuts, and we're just going to come in here, and we're just going to cut this little baby off flush. Just get your snips right under here, and just boom, headshot, just like that. Cutter flush. Now, in order to accommodate the Pluto board, we're going to need to remove this back section from our optical drive's housing. So these small Phillips screws will decouple this metal shield. Let's take this off so we can more cleanly work with it. Now our RF plating is off here. What we need to do is we need to remove all of this material from the back side, and we need to stop right here at this flap. So effectively, this little standoff right here, all the way forward, we need to cut this out so that our Pluto board can live in here nicely. Now I'm going to use a Dremel, and I'm going to do this a little bit on camera and a little bit off. It depends on how well this works. I really need to see to be able to do this. So I'll try it a little bit, and if I can't, I'll just finish it off with a file and let you guys see me do that. Okay, let's give it a shot. Great. Now this is a nice blunt edge. It's not sharp. We've got a nice line right here. Sorry I couldn't get all of that Dremel footage, but it just wasn't cooperating, and I wasn't able to see what I was doing there. So having said that, this looks great. We can put this back onto the optical, and we can move on. Now we are looking excellent here. Our Pluto board is seated beautifully into our 3D printed bezel. Our ribbon cable has been tucked away and is in pretty good position. All the soldering looks fantastic, but one thing I would like to say, the 3D printed bezel here for the HDMI port, it doesn't really get along too well with this ribbon cable. As a matter of fact, if I turn it on its side here, there is some space limitations here, and it's really hard to finagle this. Really, I think that the 3D printed component here, it just needs a little bit of polishing here to better accommodate this ribbon cable. Of course, when Greg designed this, nothing like this was ever in existence. Everybody was wiring by hand these Pluto boards. Nonetheless, it's looking pretty good here. Now, our controller line here is out of the way. I reworked it just a little bit here, but guys, this is looking fantastic, and it's at this point where I would encourage you to go ahead, strap that heatsink on temporarily, boot this up, make sure you're getting video out of this thing, that everything works, and then go right ahead and finish polishing all this up, buttoning it up, and having a good time. But we're not done just yet. The mods have only just begun. Ooh. Now, I'm working right now with a Pluto. I've got it installed in our GameCube here, and I'm having a failure, and I want to talk about the problem because this is a very important design conversation that we need to talk about, I think. Now, no offense to the creator to this ribbon cable, it's a great idea, but unfortunately this is a terrible application for this, and let me explain why. This ribbon cable is thick and it's wide, and it has a lot of castellated edges here going across that interface to our Pluto board. The problem is our ribbon cable here must be folded 2 different times, and that folding creates this springing effect where the capacitors underneath the ribbon cable are always pulling up or forward, just like this. Up, 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 always. And regardless of what I do, I can hold the board flat and you can install and make sure that ribbon cable, as you can see, is perfectly parallel to the Pluto. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be forces exercised that are pulling it forward just like that, like a spring. This is fatiguing our solder joints. Now, as you can see, we have beautiful mounds here. The welds are quite nice. There's nothing more I can do there to get these joints well wetted, but the problem, of course, is fatigue. Now, if I come here, we have this big breakout pad right here, and this red conductor is pulling 5 volts. This is our 5 volt supply. Perfect. We have continuity here. We are grabbing 5 volts and we are jamming it into this ribbon cable. From this section here, from this large pad, you can see this big thick trace. Unfortunately, because of this fatigue and because of this constant pressure, we aren't getting anything here. So we are not having any sort of connection. And regardless of how much I rework this, it's not going to fix this. The castellated edge is now broken inside and I can't do anything. Maybe if I push down on it hard enough and flex it enough, we can get it to make temporary contact. I don't think so. I think it's just too far gone, and there's nothing I can do. So now I'm going to have to bodge a connection in from here. I'm just going to remove some of this conformal coating off of this ribbon, and I am just going to come in here and I am going to do a very quick and fast repair. But it's really just a matter of coming into this like so, revealing some copper here and reconstituting this connection. But once again, great idea, but situations like this is a nightmare, and I don't think this is a good choice, and I really want to caution people from using these ribbon cables like this for applications such as this. Now, this is exactly why I say test everything before you button it back together. This flex cable had to be removed. I'm afraid that it just had too many problems and it presented too many challenges because ultimately, like I explained in the small video there, all of this tension where things have to be folded multiple times here, it just does not create for a strong mechanical bond and things break. Now, this has been wired in manually now at this point. Everything's working great. This has been thoroughly tested. I am so sorry that we went through that, but ultimately, that's how we learn things. So having said that, this is all done. We're not ready to put this back together because now we're going to dive into an awesome brand new mod chip that is wireless. Let's go for it. Now, this mod chip installs super easily. We'll be focusing right here, which is the IPL chip, and really the only thing that we have to do is take this beautiful QSB, place it in position over the IPL, make sure everything's lined up, and simply solder it into place. Okay, let's get this going right now. Now, before we get started, I want to talk about the Kunai's QSB here. One thing I will say is that if we look at these castellated edges right here, we can see that there is some significant damage as this was milled out by a drill and these weren't done very well. Now, this really hasn't anything to do with the design. This is more or less a failure on the fabricator's part. They did not take very good measures here when they were making this and they were cutting this out from the factory. So just keep this in mind. This is perfectly usable and serviceable. We'll have no problems, but just investigate these before you go to install them. Okay, let's get this in position. Now, we are zoomed in nice and tight on our IPL chip. All we're going to do is we're just going to carefully fit this over and make sure that this is lined up appropriately to all of the pins. Now again, the fitment here is great, but you will notice some defects as we just discussed with these castellated edges where the plated through holes have been damaged and they're slightly disjointed. Just keep that in mind when lining this up, and you shouldn't really ultimately have any problems, but the factory definitely can fix that and make that look a lot better. Okay, now that we have that in position, what I am going to do is I'm going to take my soldering tip just like this, and I'm going to introduce some fresh solder right in there just like that, and I am going to actually take some No Clean, and I'm just going to put a few drops in there, and I'm not soldering the whole thing. I am just going to use my left hand to line this up. And just like that, our Kunai GC is installed. Now, I really didn't talk about the procedure here because, as you saw, it really wasn't necessary. It's pretty self-explanatory. The QSB lives over the IPL chip, and after you solder that in, it's just a matter of lining up this gorgeous mod chip here. The castellated edges interface to our QSB, solder that, you're done. There's no wiring. Fantastic. Okay, at this point, go ahead, put your heatsink on, give this a test. Let's see if we can boot into a menu, and if we can, we're going to move on to another really fun and sexy mod. Let's go for it. Now the hard stuff is over. We're going to get into the simple mods. This one requires no soldering. Now this is Greg Collins or Laser Bear Industries Blue Retro internal GameCube adapter. Now let me just explain very briefly what this does. First of all, it's got all of these beautiful, colorful LEDs embedded into each controller port. That's always fun, but that is nothing. This thing will allow you to pair a variety of Bluetooth controllers, such as Wii, Nintendo Switch, 8-bit Do controllers. Basically, you name it, if it's Bluetooth, it can connect to this. But not only that, this unit right here will also allow you to remotely, that's right, remotely power on and power off your GameCube, as well as intercept resets. If you want to reset the system from a controller, you can do that too. It also has Wi-Fi capabilities so that you can tailor this and modify this and edit the configurations to your liking via a web browser. Now, I'm not going to get into all the features of this. Just know this thing is a powerhouse, well worth the money. At any rate, Very simple to install. We're going to take our existing plate right here, and the only thing that we really need to do here is just flip this upside down. We have two Phillips screws here that we have to remove, and we simply just put this in place of the old. So let's take these out and let's install this gorgeous, excellent mod. Let's go for it. Now with those screws out, it's just a matter of carefully rocking and lifting this up like so. Now we have totally liberated that board. Our faceplate is free and ready to go. Now before installing this, the only thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we've secured the antenna. It lives right here between the center or middle controller ports. So I'm going to remove this adhesive. Just like that. And I'm going to position this like so, directly in the middle. Perfect. Now the antenna wire here looks just fine. You don't have to get it perfectly centered, just get it between these two ports, and we've got that. Flip your front plate over and just bring in that PCB. You'll notice that we have two large bosses here, and we also have these two large circular provisions for those to fit into. It's very simple at this point. We're just going to line it up like so, and when we get this lined up, we're going to fit it over those posts. Here's a better angle of that. We're going to fit it over and into those posts, just like that, and when you have it, it just sits in beautifully and firmly like that, and we're ready to go. Now at this point, we're just going to bring our antenna wire over here, and you'll notice this little provision, and we'll zoom in on that, and I'll show you how to buckle this down. It's very simple. Now when you're connecting your antenna, just make sure that your fitting is parallel to the board like this. You don't want it up like this, you don't want it on its side, you want it nice and parallel, and with just even pressure, seat it like that, give it a nice wiggle. We're in like Flynn. Looks great. Now typically at this point we would just go ahead and take our front face and we would put it back into our GameCube and button this up, but we're not quite ready to do that, so we're going to set this to the side, and that is because we are going to be taking the stock housing with this very loud fan, and we're going to be replacing it with a housing that I've printed, also courtesy of Greg Collins here of Laser Bear Industries, and we'll be installing a much more silent fan, putting this into position, and wiring this up. So real quick, let's go ahead and get our new fan inserted and installed, and get this ready to go. Let's go for it. Now our fan mod is nearly complete, but there's just one more thing that we need to do. Our new fan has a 3-pin loom. I'm going to be taking our old GameCube fan here, and I'm going to be cutting off its 2-pin loom and just converting it and bringing it over here. That way this fan will work seamlessly with the GameCube. So let me show you how to do that real quick. Great job. We've installed our fan, we've modified the wiring harness for this fan, and we've also migrated our power button over to our new 3D printed fixture. Fantastic. We're going to set this to the side, and we're going to pull out our Blue Retro Laser Bear Industries board. We've got a couple of things here that we need to do prep-wise. Number one, I'm going to zoom in on this little loom right here. I think it's labeled J3. It certainly is. What we're going to do is we're going to take the included wiring harness right here, and before we move any further, we're just going to insert this just like so, jam it in. Great, that's all set. Let's keep going. Let's finish off this install. Now we are almost finished, but I just wanted to take a moment here to marvel at how beautiful the Spice Orange GameCube is. Everything looks great, especially this HDMI port. This couldn't have come out any better, and if you didn't know already, we're using a glow-in-the-dark filament here. I thought that would be real snazzy, and I'll show that off what that looks like, because not only is the HDMI glow-in-the-dark, but so is the fan mount too, which may make for a really cool effect. Having said that, one last thing remaining, an SD to SP2 adapter. This is an updated model that allows us to access the SD card from the side without having to take anything apart. Let's install this. Let's make it look good, because also we have this really cute little bezel here for it, and it's going to make this look so nice and polished. Let's give it a go. Now, I've went ahead and fitted the Game Boy player back because I just wanted you guys to see how gorgeous this is. Now, this SD card is easily accessible. On the older models of the SD to SP2, you would have to take off the bottom flap, you'd have to lift up the GameCube, you'd have to do all sorts of things basically to dismantle this to get to it. Not anymore. This is beautiful. Probably the most beautiful system Nintendo has ever made. It's just pretty. And I just have to say, I really love this Rocker Gaming jewel. Now, Rocker Gaming makes amazing stuff for the GameCube, controller parts, these beautiful jewels like this, and a variety of N64 hardware now too. Love this guy. Wonderful, wonderful member of our modding community. Now, look, I think we've all learned something here today, and I think the real takeaway is sometimes the parts that we buy to help us are the parts that hurt us the most in the end. Now, that ribbon cable, it looked great and installed beautifully, but unfortunately it just couldn't handle the fatigue and the articulation of moving it back and forth. Those small, brittle, castellated edges just could not take the stress, and ultimately we had to remove it. We had to install this manual style. Now guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider giving me a like and subbing, telling your friends about me. I'm back, I'm feeling pretty good these days, and I think that we're going to do great work together. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Check you later.